For my D-Day anniversary special in 2020, I cover the story of a large German position in the British and Canadian sector on D-Day that held out for many days after the landings. The Douvres radar facility, with its very strong bunkers and defences, was one of the last German holdouts on the D-Day beaches, only being taken on the 17th of June 1944 in a massive British operation, 14 days after D-Day. We often think that the troops landed at the 5 D-Day beaches and after some sharp fights cleared the German bunkers and blockhouses and pressed on inland. But in several cases German positions were not taken for several days after the landings, and supporting artillery batteries often proved very difficult to take out. While British and Canadian forces coming off their beaches isolated and then fought to overcome the Douvres radar station, 2 other German positions at the far end of the line near Utah Beach were to cause American forces serious problems for days after D-Day, and managed to fight off several attempts to capture them. The reduction of German shore batteries by Allied units on D-Day had been a pressing concern. All along the coast of Normandy, the Germans had large artillery weapons, many inside bomb-proof concrete casemates, guns able to fire far out to sea, and of course completely cover the Allied landing beaches. Some of the batteries were damaged or even destroyed by Allied battleships and cruisers that brought them under fire during the shore bombardment phase before the landings began, although several scored hits on Allied warships and even sank some of them. Some had to be stormed by specialist troops, for example Merville Batterie covering the British beaches, which was stormed by British airborne forces on the morning of the 6th of June. But despite these kinds of operations, several remained operational and bombarded the beaches throughout the landings and for days afterwards, 2 such being Azeville and Crisbecq batteries within range of Utah Beach, the furthest west of the D-Day landing beaches. Constructed in 1941, Azeville Batterie consisted by 1944 of 4 World War I-era French 105mm guns housed in concrete casemates, with 2 of the casemates mounting anti-aircraft cannons on their roofs. Each casemate was protected by 12 soldiers, each having 2 machine gun apertures, plus rooms for the gun crews and magazines for ammo storage. The 105mm guns could shell targets up to about 10 miles away and were crewed by 25 men each. The battery was further defended by a series of small bunkers, trenches and weapon pits, including those armed with mortars and Tobruks, small one-man machine gun positions, with a minefield and barbed wire entanglements. The garrison didn't live on site, being billeted in local villages. The battery at Asville could not see Utah Beach directly, relying on plotting information from a fire control bunker at Krisbeck, some 1.2 miles away. Asville Batterie was commanded by Hauptmann or Captain Hugo Treiber and consisted of 170 men of Army Coast Artillery Regiment 1261. Because Treiber was mostly at the fire control bunker at Krisbeck, a more junior officer, Lieutenant or Second Lieutenant Katnig, was in command at Asville. Krisbeck Batterie had larger guns, 3 Czech 210mm K-39s with a range of up to 21 miles. 2 of the guns were in large concrete casemates. A naval battery, Krisbeck, was commanded by Oberleutnant zur See Walter Onsen and 314 officers and men of the 260th Naval Coastal Artillery Battalion made up the garrison. The position also included a command bunker, bunkers for troops and ammunition, and a number of machine gun bunkers, and ground defence was augmented by the 6th Company, 919th Grenadier Regiment of the 709th Infantry Division, the Army unit which was covering Utah Beach and some of the U.S. parachute landing zones inland. This infantry company brought the total German garrison at Krisbeck to around 400 men. Krisbeck had opened fire on invasion shipping at 05:55 hours on the 6th of June 1944, exchanging fire with the battleship USS Nevada and the cruisers USS Tuscaloosa and Quincy. During the landings, the battery engaged the supporting destroyers and sank the USS Corrie. However, at 0800, Nevada managed to hit one of the casemated guns. At 0900 hours, 3 U.S. battleships, Nevada, Texas, and Arkansas, pummeled Krisbeck, knocking out the second casemated gun, killing the gun crew. Unfortunately, the third gun was able to effectively shell Utah Beach as U.S. forces landed, causing heavy losses. At Azeville Batterie, the 4 guns also opened up on Allied shipping near Utah Beach, and was able to hit the beach as well, causing problems for the U.S. 4th Infantry Division. American battleships also attacked Azville, although with much less effect than at Krisbeck. As U.S. forces fought their way off Utah Beach, retreating German troops arrived at Azeville Batterie, bolstering its garrison to some 250 men. On the 7th of June, the Americans began direct infantry attacks on both batteries, determined to silence them once and for all. Early on the 7th of June, 1st Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division advanced towards Krisbeck and the neighboring village of Saint-Marcouf. U.S. infantry got into Saint-Marcouf, but their further advance was halted by some German 75mm flak guns being used in the ground role. German infantry then counterattacked the Americans, their assault receiving fire support from the 105mm guns at Asville. The U.S. troops were forced to withdraw, and while the infantry battle was going on, U.S. battleships continued to shell Crisbecq Batterie. American field artillery coming off Utah Beach was brought up and started shelling the battery as well. The following day, 8th of June, 1st Battalion, 22nd Infantry tried again. By lunchtime, the Americans had captured Saint-Marcouf. In the early afternoon, an attack was made on Crisbecq Batterie itself. Fighting through the battery perimeter, the last German 210mm gun was put out of action, and Ponce ordered Azeville Batterie to fire at Crisbecq in order to disperse the U.S. infantry within the perimeter. The heavy fire of Azeville's 105mm guns had the desired effect. The Germans at Krisbeck were safe in their concrete shelters, while the shells hurtling in from Asville were devastating to the U.S. infantry caught out in the open, forcing the U.S. troops to withdraw from the battery perimeter. In fact, as fire lifted, Ponce ordered his men, supported by the Army Infantry Company, to counterattack the Americans and successfully pushed the 1st Battalion, 22nd Infantry back 3/4 of a mile, in the process capturing 98 American soldiers. However, that evening and night, Azeville Batterie came under ground attack from U.S. infantry, supported this time by tanks, part of efforts to finally silence Azeville and Crisbeck batteries. German machine gun fire and the fire of anti-aircraft guns used in the ground role stopped the U.S. attack. On the night of the 8th to 9th of June, Azeville Batterie was subjected to heavy fire from the battleship USS Nevada, and casemate No. 1 was knocked out, killing all the crew. On the morning of the 9th of June, U.S. artillery and tanks bombarded the battery's positions before American infantry assaulted them, but the Germans were able to call in some fire from Krisbeck, dispersing the U.S. infantry. However, the Americans next deployed flamethrowers against casemate No. 1, which also torched a munitions storage room, setting off huge explosions that killed all the Germans inside. Lieutenant Katnig, himself injured, contacted the control center at Krisbeck requesting permission to surrender, which was granted. At 14:30 hours, the batteries surrendered. 253 Germans had held the position, suffering 78 killed in action. The balance of the rest of the garrison was captured, except a small group which managed to evade capture and made off to the north. At Krisbeck, the German bunkers continued to hold out for several more days as U.S. troops moved from bunker to bunker using demolition charges and flamethrowers and satchel charges and all sorts of other weapons to try to get inside. By the morning of the 11th of June, the Germans were nearly out of ammunition and medical supplies. Konteradmiral Walter Hennecke, the German admiral commanding coastal defences in Normandy, telephoned Oberleutnant Ponce and commended him on his stand. He told him to abandon the battery and escape with his men. The decision was then taken to leave 21 German wounded behind, along with 126 American prisoners that Onsen had captured in a week of ground combat. Ormson led the remaining 78 men. They managed to break through the US forces encircling the battery and marched several miles to the still German-held battery at Masseline, arriving on the 14th of June. The battle for Krisbeck battery had been very fierce. 307 German soldiers had been killed, along with a similar number of Americans. For his gallant defense of the battery, Oberleutnant Onsen received the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest award for bravery and distinguished service. He and his men were rerouted into an infantry company, fighting during the Battle of Cherbourg, and Ormson was taken prisoner there on the 26th of June 1944. In 1956, Onsen joined the new German Navy, the Bundesmarine, retiring with the rank of Fregattenkapitän in 1967. He was also involved for about 10 years with Olympic sailing events and in an organization supporting war victims, and received the Federal Cross of Merit Second Class. Ormson died in 1988 at the age of 76. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.